Hello, my name is Zuvi and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, honey, please feel free to hit the subscribe button down below and join me on this YouTube thing. Today I'm bringing you another video, and the fact that I'm looking crusty should already tell you that this is going to be a hair video. So I am going to be dyeing my hair magenta / reddish purplish today. Don't know what it's gonna look like, but hey, we move. Also, happy new year, because clearly I should have started with that. So we're just gonna get right into the video and get this going along. So the first product I'm going to be using in this video is L'Oreal High Color Highlights. L'Oreal High Color is hair color which was specifically made for dark hair or people with dark black to dark brown hair. This product works by lifting the natural dark pigment from dark hair without the use of bleach. As we all know, bleach can be damaging to hair, therefore this can be a safer option if used in the correct way. The next product I will be using is L'Oreal's 30 Volume Developer. Developer is basically an activator consisting of hydrogen peroxide. It's the product that's usually mixed with dye color in order to activate it so that it can lift the hair cuticles, penetrate them, and deposit the color onto them. The higher the level of developer you use, then the stronger the lift is going to be, but also the more prone you are to dryness or breakage, so be careful to follow the instructions as per your dye package. For the high color that I used, the recommended developer was 30 or 40 volume, but I used 30 volume developer because I felt that 40 was too high for me. Another item you're going to need is hair ties, and that one I think is self-explanatory as to why. You're also going to need some disposable shower caps. You're also going to need a mixing bowl. Mine came with a brush for hair, but I did not use that for applying it onto my hair, so it's not necessary. I only use it to stir the dye and developer together. Last but not least, you will need some gloves. So this is what the high color looks like outside of the box. Each small tube is 1.2 OZ, and according to the instructions, if you have 1.2 OZ of the high color, then you have to add 2.4 OZ of the developer. So it's a ratio of 1 to 2. I bought 6 boxes of the high color because I wasn't sure how much I would use, and I only ended up using 4. But for me, I felt like it was better to have more than to have less. So the first step in this process for me was taking out all of my hair jewelry. Of course, if you don't have any, you can feel free to skip this step, but as you see, I do have quite a bit of it myself. The reason I chose to take it off is because if my jewelry is kept on during the dyeing process, this can make it difficult to reach areas of the locks that I covered, and as a result, it can leave some spots undyed and give off a patchy look that I was not going for. The second reason is because if I keep them on during the dyeing process, the jewelry may change color, and I personally did not want that to happen, but of course everyone is different, so feel free to do as you wish. As you can see, by this point I have finished taking out all the jewelry, and my hair is definitely a mess, but here we're going to move on to the next step. The next step of this process was to cover my face, my neck, and behind my ears with a coating of Vaseline. Sometimes when you're dyeing your hair, it's really hard to control where all the chemicals end up, therefore applying this benefited me in 2 ways. The first way is that if at any point the dye touches my skin, having the layer on top acts as a barrier that protects me against any chemical burns, because truly sometimes the dye does sting a bit, but having this on top really prevents it and makes it a lot less than it could have been if it was just direct contact with your skin. The second way is that the Vaseline acts as a layer to prevent the dye color from spreading directly onto my skin, because I was not trying to walk out of the bathroom with pink face, a pink hand, a pink neck that would not go away even after a week. So this Vaseline definitely helps, so if you're planning to dye your hair, invest in some. I was a bit worried because usually it makes me break out, but I said, hey, I'd rather have a few pimples than deal with having pink skin and not being able to get it out. Okay, so the third step of this process was sectioning my hair, and I had 2 things to consider when sectioning my hair. The first thing was how I was going to dye it in the sections, because if I made it too big it would be kind of hard to function, but if they were too small it would take probably a lot more time. So originally I wanted to do 6 sections, but then after tying the first one I decided to go with 4 sections. The second thing I had to consider was the look I was going for with the dye. I knew I did not want to dye all the hair in my head magenta, but instead I wanted an ombre look, so I wanted my hair to have a transition from black into the magenta. Therefore, while sectioning it, I made sure to leave a few inches at the bottom of my scalp in order to get the look I wanted. Furthermore, I also had not retwisted my hair in a while, so I knew that whatever measurement of black I left at the bottom of my scalp would be an inch or 2 longer once I retwisted due to the growth. So I took that in mind when I estimated the tying, and then I just put the hairband where I felt was best. So now we are on to step 4, which is making the dye mix. As you can see, I'm first prepping by wearing gloves. That's important, of course, to protect your skin. So definitely make sure you have a set at hand. These are just, I think, general like gloves. I didn't get specific gloves for doing hair because I was not trying to buy an extra set when we already had some in the house. Once I put on the gloves, I went on to opening the first tube of dye. So this dye is a metal tube and it has a small metal protective casing on top, but the cup has a sharp tip which you're allowed to use to poke through the protective casing. So that's what I did, and as you guys can see, it's such a pretty bright pink color. And honestly, seeing the color made me doubt if it was gonna come out the magenta that I wanted, because even though the packet said magenta, the dye does look bright pink, as you guys can see coming out of the tube. So I was skeptical, but let me just say, if you're gonna dye your hair, just trust the process. Don't be worried that the color is not gonna come out how you want it, because it really does. Even though it doesn't look like it in the beginning, it ends up coming out how you want it to. So this is what one of the tubes of dye looks like. As I mixed it up, I realized it did not look like much, so to start off, I decided to use 3 tubes of the dye. This is what the 3 tubes of the dye looks like. As you can see, I am mixing it together here, and this is an important step because I did not do this properly, and the fact that I didn't mix it up really smooth before adding the developer made it harder and more tedious for me to mix it in because the dye was too chunky. So definitely make sure you mix it a lot more than I did. Make sure it's really smooth before you add the developer so that you stress yourself a lot less when you're mixing it up all together. So now we are on to the next step of adding the developer. As I said previously, for every tube of dye you have to add double the amount of developer as per the instructions, but personally, after doing my 6 cups for my 3 tubes, I felt like the consistency was still too thick for my liking. So what I did was I added more and just eyeballed it until I felt like it was good enough. So if you're also dyeing your hair or planning to dye your hair, it's perfectly okay to also use your own judgment as to how much and how consistent you think it should be. Of course, you can also look at mine and try and match your consistency to mine if you're unsure. So at this moment, I was about ready to start dyeing my hair. If you look at my face, you can see I was freaking out because I really couldn't believe I was doing this. Just because I don't really do some random stuff like this, and I was just like, this was out of my comfort zone low-key. But it's a good thing I did it because you gotta take those chances in life. Otherwise, you're just gonna live something mediocre and get to 60 and be like, damn, why did I take that chance? Anyways, moving along, how I did this was I would collect some of the dye with my fingers and I would rub it on a single lock of hair. As you can see, I'm just doing a rubbing motion up and down. I'm also really squeezing it in. So if you have really dark hair, you also want to squeeze it in and make sure it's really getting in there so that the color actually sticks. So what I do is I just do it one strand at a time, making sure to get the top of the lock all the way to the bottom and making sure to also squeeze around the top part, which is tied by the rubber band, so I don't miss any other spots. This is a closer view of the up and down motion I was doing as well as the squeezing. As I had said, I was worried that my dark hair would not hold the color, and I think the squeezing in of the dye really contributed to it holding more color than I thought it would. So definitely do this if you have dark hair. At this point, I am adding dye at the bottom of my locks. So if you're dyeing your hair, make sure not to forget to dye the tips, because it's easy to always get caught up in the middle of the locks rather than the tips as well. But you also want to make sure those ends hold color too. And if you look closely, you can see that I don't add dye past the hair tie of the section. That's because the bottom I wanted to be black for the ombre look, and therefore I did not want any color on my roots. This is me at the end of the first section. As you can see, I have finished and want to move on to the next one, but I thought it would be a good idea to twist my hair and tie it out of my face so that I have easier access to the next section. But honestly, this really did not work out well for me. It just made that section really heavy and lean onto my face more, which I did not want. So if you're dyeing your hair, I recommend to just leave the section hanging. That way it won't be heavier and it'd be easier to manage how close it gets to your face. As you can see, this is where the Vaseline does come in handy. If you look closely, you can see that the first section is really close to my ear, therefore it will protect you from any burning. This is a closer view of the back section, and as you can see, I was really squeezing it in, like to the point where when you squeeze the lock, dye is leaking out. So don't be afraid to be generous with that dye and use as much as you need to get the color to stick. At this point, I have finished the second section and I am moving on to the third one. And you guys can just watch and see how I do the rest from here. It's pretty much just the same as the first two sections. It's just a repeat. So yeah. At this point, I had finished going through all 4 sections individually, but I still had a little bit of dye left in the bowl. And what I chose to do with that was just to use the remaining to go through each section one more time, just to make sure I had really got the dye into the locks. So you can see me squeezing it in, and this does not take as long as it did to do each section when I first started, because it's just a quick run through to make sure all the color stays. I am now done with dyeing my hair, and I wanted to move on to the next step, which is to put a shower cap on my head and have the dye sit for around 30 to 45 minutes. So why I took off my gloves to do this was because I did not want to get the shower cap all pink and messy. So this is why I had multiple sets of gloves in case I needed to do anything like this. So I'm taking this off and then I'm going to put on a new pair so that I can move on to the next step. At this point, I'm putting on the shower caps over my head, and if I'm being honest, these disposable shower caps are a bit hard to work with when you have a lot of hair. As you can see, I clearly did not know how exactly to put it in because the shower cap was just too light to hold all of my hair. So if you're doing this, you might want to opt for a bigger shower cap and something that's more sturdy and that you can throw away afterwards. Or if you'd like to use the disposable shower caps like I did, you can just use more than one. So after putting on the shower caps, as I said, you're supposed to leave your hair to sit for around 30 to 45 minutes. I was a bit skeptical about that time and I was worried that the color wouldn't sit. Plus, I also just got distracted and forgot. So I had it in for about 55 minutes. I don't know if I recommend that because sometimes, you hear stories of hair falling off when you keep it in too long. But honestly, I've also heard that that's not true and that the color just stops processing after 30 to 45 minutes. So nothing necessarily bad will happen. But as per the instructions, around 30 to 45 minutes. So you might not want to do the 55 that I did, but I did not have any issues after having done slightly over time.
1 hour later.
After the 55 minutes, we are on to rinsing off the hair dye. But first, I'm going to show you guys what my hair looks like after having sat with it for a while. But beforehand, I just want to mention that when you're rinsing off the dye, definitely don't do it in a white bathtub. That's something I thought of doing, and then I realized I did not want to stain it. So if you have a silver sink, like a kitchen sink or an outside sink, you can definitely use that instead. And then after the dye is all rinsed out, you can then transfer it to a bathroom to fully rinse everything out, so that the dye would not be as pungent by the time you're in the shower. So this is what the hair looks like after the dye has sat in for a while. As you can see, it still looks just as I left it, and the color is really strong. So I didn't manage to get the best angle for the wash, but I'll try to show you guys as much as I can. So I started off by taking off the hair ties, of course, and turning on the tap, getting ready to rinse off the dye. I then got a bandana and decided to tie it around my forehead. This was so that while I was washing my hair, none of the colored water leaks onto my forehead and covers my face. Yes, I still had the Vaseline, but I still wanted that extra protection over my forehead just in case. So if you feel like this would help you, definitely put a bandana and just tie it to the bottom of your scalp afterwards, and then you can reduce the amount of water running down your face. Also, I did not want dye to get in my eye in any case, because I don't know how painful that would be, but from the smell, it sounded like it would not be a fun time. So definitely do this to protect yourself. So you can't see much of what I'm doing, but I'll explain to you how I went about the washing process. So what I did first was just use water to rinse out the dye. I didn't use any shampoo yet. I just wanted to squeeze out each section and just make sure to get as much dye out of my hair as possible before adding any shampoo in. Once I felt like I had squeezed out as much dye as I could, I then got my Jamaican black castor oil shampoo and applied it onto my locks, and then squeezed it in and tried to use it to shampoo as much of the dye out of my hair as I could. This did take me a couple of washes, so be prepared to be there for a while. My back was hurting, so if you're doing this on your own, you better do some stretches beforehand, or you can alternatively get someone else to wash your hair out for you. While scrubbing in the shampoo, make sure you do the exact same motions you did with the dye. As you can see, I'm squeezing it in and rubbing it in. This is to ensure that I really get out all that dye that I stuck inside the locks. So I repeated this shampooing and rinsing process over and over again about 5 times. And once I felt like the water that was coming out of my locks was as light as possible and less pink than it originally was, that's when I knew I was ready to go take a shower and rinse it off and wash it off again in the shower until the water runs clear. So once I finished and was ready to go to the shower, I had to wrap up my hair to transfer myself upstairs. And you guys know I don't like using towels because of lint, so get a shirt and wrap your hair in it. So I just got a shirt, and as you can see, I was just trying to put them in as much as I could, wrap it up so that it doesn't drip everywhere. Okay, so I know this is a really weird angle and the lighting's off and my location keeps shifting, but I just want to give you guys a quick update. I have showered and rinsed it out, and oh my gosh, it is more prominent than I thought it would be. Oh, I'm still getting used to it, but I think I kind of like it. What is this? Look at this. Those flyaways. Anyways, that will be in the lock when I retwist it, so we're not even gonna mind those. That's what I didn't want at the bottom, so I'm glad that most of it is still the same. As you can tell, my hair needs a retwist, so I'm just gonna retwist it right now. But this is the color. This is what we're working with. Anyways, I'm gonna get to retwisting and I'll show you guys the final look once I finish retwisting. That might be tomorrow because I know for a fact by the time I finish, the lighting would have gone. So yeah. Anyways, that's all. Okay, bye.